Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. Please feel free to put here in the chat where you are watching us from today. And today we have the pleasure to be here with Amrit, a student of Chicago Booth, class of 2024. How are you, Amrit? Great to be here with you.
I'm good, Fernando. Thanks so much for having me here. It's great to be able to sort of connect with another second year business school. We were just laughing about it earlier, but then also be able to sort of help the applicants think through, how to craft their applications, how to be thinking through this whole experience, especially for folks who might be coming from non-traditional backgrounds. I think they might see value in today's discussion.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for being here. And as a quick intro, we were talking about that right now, but for people who are watching us, so my name is Fernando. I have the pleasure to be here with Amrit once again, and I'm currently a second year at UVA Darden, who is pivoting to consulting with the MBA. So if you would like to talk a little bit about it, it sounds so much like an interview question, right, Amrit? Like, tell a little bit about yourself. So if you would like just to mention a bit of your background, like, and what did you do before, and what you are doing now, what you did for the summer, and what you plan to do for full time.
Yeah. Thanks, Fernando. So I'm Amrit. I was in the Indian Air Force for 11 and a half years as a pilot and decided to transition from the military. At the point when I was writing my applications to business school, I was in between consulting and banking. And that's where Chicago Booth made a lot of sense. And we can talk more about that subsequently, but came to Booth with an eye on investment banking, had a great first year, went to Moelis and Company for the summer in New York, had a great experience there as well, and will most likely be doing investment banking full time too. Um, Great experience at Booth, like specifically when we get to it, like I'd be happy to provide more color there. But yeah, whichever way you want to drive this.
Amazing. And where are you from, Amrit, once again?
I'm from India, so I had served in the Indian Air Force.
Uh-huh, nice. In which city, which region specifically?
My family is in North India. I'm from North India too. In fact, I don't have a turban and a beard.
Uh-huh.
Ethnically, I'm a Sardar, so I'm supposed to have like a beard just as good as yours.
Yeah, see, like, I mean, lots of people say that they try to grow that beard, but I mean,
It's
it's not
not. It's not easy.
fun.
It's not, yeah, it's not easy. My father does it, and I see him making all the efforts, and I was like, yeah, this is too much effort for me.
Don't doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, and I even asked you that because I was just mentioning in our 100K followers stream that we had like yesterday. By the way,
Yeah.
everyone
Oh, wow.
watching, if you
Congrats.
could like just hit follow and hit the bell so you can get all of our notifications, it would be great. It helps us a lot. And I was just mentioning that I try to learn Hindi with some of my friends from India here. Some of
Uh-huh.
my best friends are from India, and I mean all that they wanna teach me are curse words. So apart from that, at least I know how to say my name. Bohat
Yeah.
Nevad, this kind of stuff. Me Charlottesville Mehun. So I.
Yeah.
I'm getting there, Maybe 10 years from now, I will be able to be fluent in Hindi. Let's see.
Yeah. We could also totally switch this interview to doing it in Hindi. We could give you some practice too, like if you're up for it.
I mean, maybe I'm not that confident. Maybe 10 years from now, as I said.
Yeah.
But as you were mentioning, Emirates, so you came from a non-traditional background for the MBA. So
Yeah.
why did you decide like to pursue an MBA and like to move countries to come here? When two questions actually. One, what was the moment that you realized like, hey, I'm going to do an MBA. I want to start preparing for the GMAT for everything. And two, why was that?
Yeah. Great questions, both of them, Fernando. And let me start with the first one. I think the pivotal moment for me was I had put in good about 8 to 9 years of service at that time, had different roles, both as a combat pilot and other leadership roles as well. And I worked very closely with some senior Air Force commanders and got an insight into what their work looked like. And when you're on a leadership track within the military, like especially in the Air Force, it starts to turn into a desk job. So I was looking at 5 years or so of active duty flying, but then it essentially just being a desk job, right? And I had to ask myself some like deep probing questions. That is that what I wanted to do? And unfortunately enough, like if you have to make a change, I think doing that around the 30-year age group, it sort of makes sense in that bracket. And I realized that okay, what else is out there? Let me explore. So I connected with folks from literally everywhere. Commercial aviation was something that I did not want to do. That was very clear to me. So I spoke to consultants, bankers, folks from the startup world, and then it kind of sort of dawned on me that if I was to make this change aptly and like get to the best place for me, perhaps business school made a lot of sense. Especially for some careers, like it just makes, it's just a traditional path to sort of go down the MBA route. And then my undergrad was in computer science, so I did need a formal education in business. So for all those reasons, like getting an MBA made a lot of sense. And especially when I started to look at investment banking more seriously, um, it kind of became clear that it's a super selective career. Like it's difficult to break into. You need to be at a target school essentially, like to increase your odds. Um, Decided to not do the MBA in India because like we can work with investment banking as an example. Like we could also talk about more broadly. It is essentially in the US where this market is most matured. Deal flow is strongest, so it made more sense to come to a US business school, look at New York very closely for investment banking. So all of those things started to come together. And like candidly enough, I wanted to push myself. Like when I was doing my research, like very much like folks on the call here, I looked at what are the top business schools in the world, and I was like, why not? Like, let me try and let's see where we get in. And I was like super pumped when I got my admit from Booth. And I'm happy to talk more about that experience, like how being at a strong school positions you so well. And I'm sure you would agree, Fernando, like even for Darden, right? Like the access that you have, the support systems in place, like they set you up for success. Like, should you put in the effort, of course.
Yeah, definitely. It's at the end of the day, it's all about, I think, and with like I said, a combination of you putting in the effort, you wanting to do that for real, and the opportunities that the school gives you. Like they give you the opportunities, but if you're not there to take them, I mean,
Yeah.
you said it perfectly. And something that I get asked a lot by people, just before we go to like why Booth and why do you think that Booth made a difference there? Something that people normally ask me is if I let me summarize it, if I think I would be where I am right now without the MBA. So this is one question that I would like to ask you. So do you think that the MBA was essential for you to get where you are? So, or do you think that people could get there from you could have gotten there in other ways?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a pretty straightforward answer, right? Like, I don't think I would be here without the Booth MBA specifically. And I think I needed the MBA to go down the route that I'm planning to do, mostly on the finance side. Especially in the Indian market, like there are programs that are now springing up for veterans to transition well into the corporate world,
Mm-hmm.
but they aren't necessarily, and like for example, investment banking roles,
Mm-hmm.
the adjacencies, tertiary roles. So to get to where I'm going, like I needed this MBA, and I frankly needed the education too, right? Like all of the finance classes I have taken and do plan to take, all of that material you do need to know to do the job well. So for me, it's a pretty straightforward answer. Now, a lot of my peers are also going exploring entrepreneurial routes here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need an MBA for that? I guess the question is open ended. Like some people have done it all without ever going to grad school, and some people find that there's great support at business school. Like some of these schools are set up in that way with a focus on entrepreneurship. So like, that's like a very personal decision, I guess, in that
Mm-hmm.
case.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And just going to our next point, and everyone who is watching us, thank you so much once again. Feel free to send questions here in the chat, and also don't forget to like. the video and subscribe to the channel. So going to the next question that we were just talking about, Emrit. So why Booth? Why do you think that Booth was able to set you up for success?
100%. There's two sides to sort of why Booth made a lot of sense. At a high level, like I said before, I was looking at both consulting and banking when I was like still making my applications and like still thinking through business school. Um, so it was important for me to be well positioned during the fall recruiting season. And what I mean by that is, if you're at a target school, that changes a whole lot. And Booth is a target for both consulting and banking. For someone who may be super focused on, say, consulting, there are the great schools that one could go to. But I would caution that if someone was in my situation where they're in two boats and not necessarily sure, potentially looking at schools that are target schools of both consulting and banking, those tend to be more, sort of the more traditional paths that people take. It would you would one would be better positioned if they were at Booth, Columbia, Darden, HBS, where you could go down either routes equally successfully. So that was definitely one that was top of mind for me. Second thing was like, because I was considering investment banking, like going to a school that is like probably the best school for finance, like made a lot of sense. And I've realized that being here helps. Some of the professors also got Nobel while I was here. Other than that, I feel like the armed forces group at Booth really supported me. And if it were not for all of the help that I got when I was applying, I probably would not be at Booth or would not have had the ability to apply to all the other top schools that I did apply to. And as an AFG member now, like, our focus is on helping veterans get to the best school for them, whether it's Booth, whether it's another one. So we wouldn't necessarily, shy away from working on folks' resumes, giving them, help on their resumes, like crafting their story, thinking about, and, frankly, giving candid advice on how to think about business school and, which school makes more sense for them. So because I had that experience, I kind of used that as a proxy for the support I might see when I was actually a first year, and which has been so true. Like when I was recruiting for investment banking, all of the veterans like went out of their way to support me, and all the second years too. So Booth is famous for its paid forward culture, and I've like seen it come to life. um, so yeah, like all of that came together for me when I was looking at Booth. And then the fact that they gave me a scholarship just made it easier. And without the scholarship, I would have still gone. I would have still come to Chicago Booth, no doubt. But just having a scholarship made it um, easier, and also made me feel like I was valued. So yeah, I guess like for all of those reasons, both made sense.
No, definitely. And the scholarships mainly for us. Like I'm originally from Brazil. You're from India. Like we know this
Yeah,
the currency disparity that is
yeah,
going on now. So it's like it helps a lot.
it does.
And so you mentioned lots of aspects, Emrit, of both like the focus on certain industries, the community that helped you a lot, and something that I'm gonna ask not only for people to know, but also a personal curiosity of mine.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
did you manage the curriculum, the academic curriculum? Because we know, at least from what I heard, it's a very open
yeah.
curriculum. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, I think for me it was a little bit easier because I knew that I needed the basic foundations. So when I was building out my curriculum, and you're absolutely right, like when Booth says flexible curriculum, they mean it's flexible. Like, and like first years and second years take classes together all the time. That's like a common norm here. Some of the second years would be taking foundation courses in the second year, which I'm doing now. Like you have to meet your degree requirements. So what it meant for me was like I took baby accounting, baby micro early on, so that I could start to understand intuitively what business really looked like. And then when my summer was hitting, I took a sort of advanced course in accounting, which is called financial statement analysis, which helped me get well set up for the summer. And I would think that everyone, the way people would use the flexible curriculum would really be as to what their needs are. And had it not been for the flexible curriculum, I would have been doing, say, an operations course, which was not super relevant to my summer internship, right? So having that ability to, front load a, I would say, medium to heavy course load finance course, like really helped me through the summer, right? And as I was working through the three statements. And maybe someone who's looking at consulting or someone who's looking at PEVC, like there's an ability to take the PEVC lab really early on, like fall quarter onwards. Like if there's a first year, say, who's looking to go down that route, like you could start networking and working with PE firms like in your first year, which frankly not a lot of other schools are able to offer as part of their curriculum.
In for some of these classes, Emrit, so let's say, as you mentioned, that some classes, first years and second years, take them together.
Yeah.
So would you say that for some of them, it's like a stretch for first years to take them because they don't have the foundational knowledge yet? Or does the professor or the community make sure to offer like the foundational content beforehand? So how does that work exactly? Let's say if people who are watching us come into booth as first years and they have like 50 courses they can choose from.
Yeah.
So do some of them have like requirements, so they require you to take another course beforehand to have the foundation? So how is that part of it exactly?
Very valid question. And the way it works is, you could take the foundation courses if you need them. You could also waive them. To waive them, there are certain requirements like maybe CFA or something. Or like you've taken it for undergrad for like the baby foundation courses. For the more advanced courses, the way it would be layered is, have you taken the more basic courses before? And if you have, then you're able to bid for those courses, like the more advanced ones. Or perhaps you have an advanced degree, maybe a master's in econ or something, or in accounting. So that could also let you waive some of the foundational requirements. Or maybe you have CFA or like relevant work experience. So that is all of that is to say that there's great support from academic services on how to think through working out what curriculum makes sense for you. And from professors, like there's an ability to have a conversation around, hey, this is where I'm coming from, this is what I did in my undergrad, and my work experience are relevant too. So I feel like I don't need to take these X, Y, or Z courses to be in the class. And they would candidly tell you that, look, if it's too much work and they think that you can't handle it, they'd ask you to like take another course and then come back, or they might just let you into the class. So it's pretty open, and it's more like a conversation. um, Although there are like requirements laid out when you're trying for these courses.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I believe that this talks back to the factor you're saying about the community. So
Yeah.
being really conversational and open, and something that a lot of people normally ask all of us is, if you had Emery to give an advice now to people who are choosing which schools they want to apply to, what would that be? What would you say that they should look at, and one or two pieces of advice on how should they choose those target schools?
That's an interesting question, and I think it's going to look different for people depending on where they're looking to go, and what they're looking to get out of the MBA too. But if I had to sort of give a short answer to that question, it would be, do you know what career you're looking at? Ask yourself that first. And if you're sure, then perhaps look at business schools that have great outcomes in that industry or in that career path, and start to prioritize that way. You also want to be strategic in the sense that if someone has like 3 years, it doesn't really matter. Like they don't need to start business school right like immediately or in the short period of time. Then there's an ability to sort of apply over a course of like 2-3 years and like get into whatever dream school that you're looking to go to. But the applications and the decisions process is a black box. So you don't want to be applying only to like and I hate it when they rank it, but Chicago booth is top of that list. So you don't really you shouldn't just be applying to top five schools. Like if you really need to start in the short term, then perhaps you'd be better positioned if you also apply to schools, like if there was a spread, right? So there's a dream school, there's a target school, there's a more practical school that you can get into. I'll also caveat that by saying, Fernando, to your point earlier, right? You're from Brazil, I'm from India. There is our home currencies may not be as strong. So when you're picking up debt in US dollars, like you want to make sure you go to a school that is strong enough for you to get the outcome that you want, so that there's an ability to, not just pay off your debt but also have like successful career growth over time. So I would caution against applying to business schools that perhaps don't have as strong a brand name in the market, especially in the US. The story looks very different if you're looking at more visa friendly countries in the Europe, or like even in our home countries, right? um, I know that may not be super helpful, and I'm not calling out school names because, frankly, like these rankings move up and down and move back and forth. What would be super helpful would be for folks to have conversations with current students, um, because that's where you'll glean more meaningful information. Just the point around that Booth is a target for both consulting and banking is not going to be found on any website. That was something that I learned through a conversation with the second year. So I guess speaking to second years or first years at these schools and trying to gauge what their experience looked like, what the outcomes have looked like for them and their peers, would give you a better sense of what school makes, is a good fit for you.
And normally, thank you so much for the answer, Henry. And normally, how would you reach out to people? So LinkedIn, emails, admissions. What path would you choose?
Yeah, I think I'd start off by saying that for any veteran who's interested in Booth, we have a Booth Armed Forces group. We have a website. There's an intake form. You can fill that out. And on our end, like we mentor applicants and connect them one on one. But more broadly and in general, I think the way to do it would be see if there are clubs that make sense for you. For veterans, there's a veteran group or like a veteran club at all schools, most schools. um, if you're looking to do consulting, like I'm pretty sure like every school has like a consulting club. So reach out to those people. LinkedIn is great to look at folks who are attending these schools. Like try to find something common. It's as a veteran, I would usually be reaching out to veterans at these schools, and almost always got a response from them. But if you're an Indian, like try to reach out to Indian students, not just because you have something in common, but your experience could also look very similar. Like there are cultural differences. Um, there are clubs or groups that are targeted at a certain audience. So like there's clubs for LATAM folks, there's club for South Asian guys. So all of that. So you'll gauge not just career outcomes, but you'll also gain a sense of what the culture looks like, how supportive the school or the students are. And not all schools will do that, but some of them will give you like a short directory of admissions ambassadors or like students in general. I know Booth does that. So you're able to filter by industry, country of origin, and interests too. So like if you can use that filter and find students and send them an email. Most it just depends. Like sometimes business school students get busy, and Fernando, you'd agree there. But I guess most people do want to have a conversation and help people out because we've been in their shoes, and we do understand what an important decision this is. So definitely reaching out to current students and maybe even alums is, I guess, a great starting point as you're thinking through applying.
Yes, I always tell people if I happen not to answer you, please feel free to send a follow up email. I don't
Oh
think I'm a bad guy. It's just like
yeah.
too much going on. It's not because I don't want you. So exactly to your point.
Yeah.
And so from what I hear, you said so the focus for people who are still considering would be like maybe getting other alums or students who have something in common with them. So let's say be the background where you're from, your career goal to maximize these interactions.
Yeah, and I just want to add here that think of it more tactically too, right? Like
Mhm.
when you're working on your application, um, you'd want to be able to mention people that you've had conversations with. Like that's how you indicate strong interest to the school.
Mm-hmm.
That you made the effort to reach out to people, because it does take effort. Not everyone will be able to get back to you right away. And if you're applying to like anywhere in the range of like, or at least considering 10 business schools and looking at having two conversations, that's like 20 conversations,
Mm-hmm.
30 minutes, maybe a stretch, 60 minutes. Like just do the math. Like it takes time to do these things. And it's a strong indicator for your interest, but then you'll also be able to suss out stories that just make your application all the more stronger. So like
Mm-hmm.
there's good reason to do it, even if you know that there's X set of schools that you would want to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and an example would be like if someone is watching this video, they'd be better positioned than someone who's not had conversations with students in answering like any question, or like even trying to make the story more convincing. Like our conversation around the flexible curriculum that Booth
Mm-hmm.
has, or like Chicago Booth's data-driven approach to academics. Like, so when you speak to current students, you'll be able to gain, like your stories will be more meaty and will go beyond what the website has to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. And something about Chicago that I have to ask you, Amit, is the weather still nice? September 24th or not anymore already?
Oh, it's pretty pleasant right now. Hopefully, will remain this way until like early November, or maybe
Oh, nice.
that's a stretch.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
I'm just being optimistically cautious and hopeful. But yeah, it's like 70, 75 through the day, so it's
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 great.
pleasant.
It's
Yeah,
great.
it's quite
I
nice.
do have to visit Chicago again. In my 1 year, I moved here to the US July past year. So in my 14 months, I have visited the city only once. It
Yeah,
was during the summer, so I had a great impression. I loved it. And some one question that we got here, and you all please feel free once again to send questions and to like and subscribe. We will always be saying that.
yeah.
So one question that we got here, and it is, how was your adaptation in the US? Like from when you moved from India, how was it? Do you think it was like chill in terms of community, in terms of having a different recruitment culture, as we know, like lots of networking and stuff? How was it in general?
That's a great question, and I feel like for me, the change, at least culturally, wasn't a huge one. Business school is pretty social. So is the military. So like those, there was significant cultural overlap because of my previous career and kind of the community that I was coming from. Because military folks are like, they know each other well. They're super supportive of each other's success, completely invested. So all of that was like very similar at Booth too. Um, I guess what a big difference was like I was in India. It's a developing country, and like you switch over to the first world, um, and essentially everything is just easy. And that's all that to say is someone is like worrying that it will be a huge change and like difficult adjustment. Um, I feel like if you're coming from the developing world, um, you do just fine. Like things are way easier here, things are more sorted, don't worry about it. Having said that, of course, like there's some amount of culture shock that people experience, which I feel like is part of your growth journey, and you'd be pushed in some ways, especially if you're a business school in the classroom, like you'd be cold called. India didn't really have a culture of sort of talking back to your professors. That is not true here. You are kind of expected to have a conversation and a debate with all of your professors as well. So the long answer to that is um, not a whole lot of adjustment, culturally, but at the same time, great experience in terms of experiencing um, what the first world looks like. And I guess recruiting wise, because I had not really recruited in India either, this was like a first to me. Pretty networking heavy, especially within investment banking. but something that I had done when I was looking at business schools too. So, the math that I shared earlier on having those conversations, I had done that. So the networking piece looked very similar when I was recruiting here too. I wish I could have like answered that question better, but that's just been my experience. For someone who's like, and maybe you can answer this question better than I can, Fernando, if you had worked in Brazil and like, recruited in Brazil and what your experiences look like.
No, your answer was actually great, and also for me. So I'm a lawyer by training now.
Oh,
Like I said, going into consulting, but I worked for the Brazilian government. So over there in Brazil, I don't know if it's the same in India. Like to work for the government, you have to go over a test, and if you are approved, like in a certain percentage of people, you
yeah.
get into the job, and if you're not, you're out. So that's my experience recruiting in Brazil, as also basically the same as you, like being a lawyer in the Court of Justice of São Paulo over there. So can
Yeah.
talk a lot to that as well. But I know that something that people do notice is that many times people say, "Hey, in my country, all I would have to do was sending the resume, and that's it, waiting for someone to reach out." And here it's much more. I think you have to send a resume, you gotta have all the skills, but at the same time you have to prove you have the interpersonal skills, like networking and building up a reputation for yourself. So I thought that this aspect was very different and important as well. Like I said, mainly for both banking and consulting, networking can be a big part of the process.
Yeah, and I feel like I can add here, especially in India, I've heard like this for business school recruiting, like you have to be like top 1%
Mm,
of your class to recruit with like leading consulting firms like McKinsey, BCG,
mm,
Bain, and I think same is true for like investment banking and other tech firms like Google. Like if you're not in the top 1%, you're not even getting face time with these companies.
mm,
That's how it works in India. I'm not sure how it works
mm.
elsewhere, but in the US, like most business schools have grade non-disclosure.
Mhm.
That's not to say that people don't want to work hard on like
Yeah.
on their academics or not focus on that. That's not true. But what it does do is like it lets you put your best self in front of the recruiters and let them judge how you perform through the networking and how you did in your interviews and make an offer regardless of what your academic standing is. And the second thing it does is it gives you the freedom to explore, and that has given me an ability to take like finance classes which are like clearly were out of my league because I wasn't concerned that it's going to affect my grade. So that essentially allowed me to sort of push my bounds and like really go out there and experiment and learn. Whereas if I knew that my grade was going to affect my recruiting, I would probably have like gone with safer courses. So I felt like that again was like, yeah, that
Yeah.
that approach I feel like is more organic
Hmm.
because being on the job is a whole lot more than just grades.
Exactly. Much, much more. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the opportunities, the doors that business schools open to you. Because, like, to be honest, I would not make the 1% cut at all. So, I mean, it does
Yeah,
opens a lot of doors to you, and to be able to, like, because we know that people have different priorities. So for someone, their priority might be academic. For someone else, might be recruitment. For someone else, might be social and networking. So
yeah,
this non-disclosure of the GPA is something that really allows you, I think, to prioritize what you think is really important according to your moment. Like maybe at the start of school is recruitment. Maybe like after you recruited, naturally it will be academics or social. I mean, it's something that really helps on that journey. And so, just so we can transition to another part of the questions, and hit once again to everyone who is watching, feel free to send questions here in our chat. Something that I know people are very interested about is, oh, you see, I can barely say this name, GMAT.
Yeah.
So, how was your GMAT journey? So, coming from the military, did you feel that you had a harder time in quant over verbal or the opposite? And so, this is one question. And the second part of it is, did you feel that there was a higher bump on your GMAT journey? So, something specifically that really bothered you?
Yeah, the beast, GMAT. I struggled. It had been a while since I had been in the books. High school math had been long forgotten. So it was an effort getting back to it, like just the habit of sort of getting back into the books to build with. But then also, I think early on, I failed to understand what the test was all about. And a lot of test takers tend to make this mistake. It is not a test that is trying to gauge your, or it's not looking for you to get all the answers right. So that was something that I was doing. I was definitely doing it wrong, and I was trying to do it myself. Like just working with the OGs and thought I'd hack it. That didn't work out really well. Like my first score was 640. So for anyone who's watching this video right now, like don't be heartbroken if you have like a crappy first score. It's completely fine. You can work your way upwards. What will help you is getting the right guidance. And it's not a plug, but Manhattan seemed to work well for me. It was structured in the way the course was laid out. It was also completely online because I was either deployed or super busy with work. So like going to an in-person GMAT coaching was like not an option for me. And it was more than just the mechanics of quant and verbal. I had a habit of like reading books since an early age, so I was rather comfortable with verbal. And then the job demanded a lot of mental math, so like I was quantitatively just fine. So it wasn't a struggle in the sense, but I guess when I saw that bump in my score was when I understood what the test was really looking to sort of gauge, and that's an ability in decision making. Um, However, I don't know, like for some people it may not make sense, but it did to me. Where if you for sure know that you're going to get a question wrong, you might as well take a guess, or like you can't really skip it, but like use the best guess that you have rather than wasting time and move on to the next one, which hopefully you can get right. And there's great content on the GMAT's algorithm. And I guess one would be well positioned if they understood what the test is trying to gauge and what abilities it is trying to find in you. It is not just about getting every question right. If that is what you do, like you will definitely, your score will be impacted by that. Um, I kind of maxed out at 710, and I'm happy to talk about this candidly because a lot of applicants, like, sure, like for someone it's going to be 720, for someone it's going to be 730. Like, if you can get a 780, like, good for you. But when I was at the 710 mark, I didn't have a whole lot of time to continue to improve my score. And I had to take a tough decision at that point that am I going to continue working with GMAT and let that hamper the quality of my applications? Or am I going to be okay with applying with this score, but make sure that my entire application packet is as strong as it can be. Um, so that's why I kind of like stopped at 710. And I guess people would benefit from also thinking about this from an admissions point of view. Like if your score is above 700, you're a reasonably smart person. So like you already allay any concerns around being able to, keep up with the course load. After that point, it really is like, do they see you as a good fit for the school? Do they think that you'll be successful in recruiting? And what else do you bring other than just the GMAT? So I wanted to call that out because sometimes people can get like hyper focused on getting a perfect score and let like the other parts of their application get impacted, because especially in the US, like your essays or interviews are like so more important, if not like as important as the GMAT score.
Hmm. So just to play it back, you would say that there is a time when you do have to decide, like if you want to stop it, working on the GMAT and go work on your essays, on your interview prep, or if you want to keep working on the GMAT and maybe sacrifice this part that's just as important, right? That is like this interpersonal aspect.
Yeah, Yeah. And I
No.
guess you could do it. I've known people who've done it, like both worked on their application materials and also like prepared for the
Mhm.
GMAT on the side and like gotten it right, which is great. But I feel like you would be better positioned if you sort of staggered it, where you prepared for the GMAT, get 100% behind the GMAT. And while you're taking your breaks, you're probably shooting emails to students and having those
Mhm.
conversations so that you can change things up. And by the time you have a decent GMAT score, you have all of this material and sort of well positioned to then start working on crafting your story and crafting a strong
Mhm.
application. That is an approach that I took and worked well for me, and that is something that I.
No, that's nice. Nice. Boha Dhanyavad for your answer, Amhit. One of the few words that I mentioned to you of the good words I know in Hindi. And you were just saying that once you realize that the GMAT is not about like getting every question correct, but also about your decision making. You said that this changed your approach to how you would take the test, but did it also change the approach to how you would prepare? Once you realize that, did you start preparing differently?
Yes, 100%. When I realized that, what I started to do was I started to bucket my strengths and my weaknesses. And this was both across quant and verbal, right? So I knew that statistics questions were like easier to get, quicker to work with if I knew the material well. So that was so, I'm just like giving an example here, but combinatorics was something that I took more time and even then ended up getting them wrong. So I came to kind of a place where I was like, okay, if it's a statistics advanced question, I'm going to still go for it. But if it's like an advanced combinatorics, I'm not even going to try. Like, I'm just going to take the best guess I can and move on. And in that way, it affected my prep because I started to invest more time on where my strengths were. And where I knew I was weak, I couldn't completely neglect them. I definitely want to get like the basic questions right. Because if you get like an easy question wrong, regardless of the subject matter, your score just plunges. So like you need to have relatively okay baseline across different subjects. But when you're starting to play in like the 700, 750 ballpark, then it's really about how many, like what advanced you need to know. Okay, these set of subjects or these set of disciplines I can get questions right, and those are the ones I'm going to work with. And let's say there are these two or three topics that I know I'm weak on, I might as well like not even try to touch them. And that just helps you focus your prep. And I feel like that helps people bump up their score. And that same advice holds true for verbal too. Like, no, are you good at like at SC or at the comprehension piece, and like specifically know like what your in critical reasoning, like know where your strengths are and what kind of questions, and then focus your prep that way.
And these strengths and weaknesses, you found out about them when preparing for the GMAT, or did you have any some idea before?
Some of it was intuitive.
Mhm.
As I started working through the material, like some of this just intuitively I could tell that okay, I'm strong here and perhaps weaker there.
Mhm.
But I guess the most helpful piece was going like debriefing the tests that I took, um, like the official tests from GMAC, and then also the Manhattan test that I was taking. So I spent, I think, maybe 2 days just debriefing, like drilling into every question. That, why did I take this longer time to get it, or like why did I get
Mhm.
it wrong to begin with? And like if the mechanics didn't make sense to me in a certain discipline, then I would just like bracket it as a weakness, especially if it happened in an advanced area. So
Mhm.
like both when you're working through the materials, but definitely when you're taking the mock test, like know where
Mhm.
you're doing well and where you're not doing perhaps that well.
And since you mentioned this time management aspect, we always get lots of questions about how did you do to improve on that. So, did it come naturally as you prepared, or did you adopt some specific strategy to improve the time management part of your test taking?
I think some of that ability was ingrained by the nature of my work as a
Mhm.
pilot, because you need to have a cadence for things in the cockpit.
Mhm.
But there were definitely strategies that I used, and I think it's been a while since I took the GMAT, so I'm maybe a
Mhm.
little bit rusty around the edges here. But there's a blog on Manhattan's website that talks specifically about it, like how to lay out your scratch paper so that you know that you're proceeding, in a timely manner through the test. And that's the approach that I use. So I would set up my scratch paper with like the expected time to see after every four questions at the
Mhm.
bottom of the scratch paper. Because doing that kind of math, which is not super complicated during the test, like it can still take away a few seconds or like put
Yeah.
extra pressure on you. So if you just have that on your scratch paper as you're working through it, was a helpful approach. So I had like divided my scratch paper into four boxes. Those were the four questions. And then I knew at the end, like when I'm finishing up my fourth question, like what time do I actually expect to see on the screen? And that just helped me maintain the right cadence throughout the test.
Nice. And that I thought that this was such a great strategy that I ended up adopting
Yeah.
as well. Because otherwise you would just at first, I don't know if you tried to do that as well. I thought, no, I can know in my head what time
Yeah.
I aim to have by the fourth question, but pressure mounts up and you're just like, oh my god, what the I won't say the word here, but like
Yeah.
what now? So having it noted down helps so much too. Like
And especially with verbal, right? Like when reading comprehension, like it's like a number of questions built into it. Like how do you even plan around that? So yeah, it takes a little bit of time to sort of get comfortable, especially and even with the verbal thing.
yeah, no, definitely. And there is a comment here from Abhishek. Seeing a combat pilot, heads off, hit. You are literally hit. So now you have to tell me the meaning of hit because so I can improve my Hindi.
Yeah, for sure. So Amrit means elixir of life.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So not too sure if I'm immortal yet. I guess we'll wait a few to find out. But that's what it means.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's good to know because during the summer, I went to a restaurant with my wife, an Indian restaurant in Miami. And how do you say hit again? Sky in Hindi? Asha. What's the word? Oh, I think you got frozen here on my end.
Yeah, for a second. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. Now I can hear you. So I was. Can you hear me?
Fernando, can you still hear me?
Yes. For me, it's perfect. Can you hear me? I can hear you over here.
I can hear you too. I think there was a glitch for a second there.
Oh no, perfect. So I was just thinking about the meaning of the of different words. I remember that I went to an Indian restaurant with my wife during the summer, and the name was
Yeah.
Akash. So she wanted to like show off her Hindi skills as well, which are like mine. So she said, "Me
Uh,
Akash me hum," and the guy told her,
uh,
I mean, maybe you have to say Akash restaurant, otherwise people will think you're like flying.
true.
So it's always good to know.
Yeah.
And Abhishek Gadia, thank you so much, man, for your questions. He also asked two other questions. So one, if you left your job, and the second one, he mentioned that he has been in the government for 10 years, 3 years in tech, and if you have any advice for a business school for him at age 36, 37.
Yeah. Uh, if I heard that right, the first part of the question was if I loved my job or not.
Yes, yeah. And just to take advantage of Yugen's question, why did you leave it?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it early on. Firstly, I loved my job. It was a phenomenal job, very interesting, exciting. Um, Definitely a lot of adrenaline to go around doing that kind of work. But like I touched on it earlier, it moves very quickly to being a desk job entirely. Um, and that was something that did not excite me. And I had like great visibility into what that work looked like. So that was primarily my reason around, I can't be doing flying all my life, which I would love to do, and hopefully we'll start doing in the States soon too. So then what else is out there for me? So it was sort of an exploratory journey in knowing for certain that it was not this desk job that I wanted to do, So if it is a desk job, what other desk job could I possibly do? So though that was kind of my reason around like leaving. And for the age piece, I'll say this, like if you're 36, 37, it's tough. I would, and I don't know where this person is, but if they're in India, I would advise looking at ISB. I hear that they're open to more older applicants, and so are some of the 1 year exec programs. Now there are great 1 year programs in the US too. Like one is MIT, other than Stanford's MSc or something. I think. Um, because there's just an age range. Like think about it from the recruiter's point of view, right? Like you're 37 now, or you're 36 now. You apply, you get in by 37. You graduate by your 39. All of these companies who are coming to campus are looking to hire talent between a certain age range and certain number of years of experience. Now, when you don't sit between that bracket, regardless of whether you have an admit or not, like you're doing yourself injustice by spending all this money and like going through business school for 2 years and then not even being a candidate that perhaps these companies might be interested in. So, is there another program that's a better fit for you? Yes, there are. Having said that, there are folks who are 36, 37 at business school. They do extremely well, super successful. So, like, it's going to be your story. What are you looking to do? Just some upfront work around do, for example, like do consulting associates. Like, do they hire those many people who have those many years of experience or not? Like, are investment banking associates relatively more senior? Is it an open-ended, uh, you know, sort of experience bracket? Like, do that sort of work up front to see if it makes sense for you. But generally speaking, I think that would be a little bit on the older side, especially for US business schools.
Well, thank you so much for the answers, and thank you also Abhishek and Yugen for the questions. Keep them coming for our last 7 minutes here, and also remember to like the video and subscribe to us on YouTube. It's important to say that everyone that subscribes to GMAT Club channel will get a free access to premium GMAT question bank for 7 days, so take advantage of that. And something else that I would like to ask you, Anhit, is did you end up taking the GMAT online or in person, and why?
Um, I think I took it at the centers, with the exception of my last score, which I took online from home because I think COVID was going around at that point. And I think it took me 3 attempts, I think, to get to the 710. Um, yeah.
No, nice. I ended up I from what I remember, I think I took two in person and one online, and the online experience was like, oh my god. The
Yeah.
test, I had gone over more than half of the test. I started with quant, finished quant, like I said, lawyer by training, so quant, hardest part for me. Already half of verbal, and the test just froze out of nowhere. I remember like calling for the proctor for half an hour in front of my camera and no one showing up, and I was, oh my god.
Yeah, the same thing happened to me, like, and it
Oh,
happened during verbal, and I took quant first, and the
uh-huh.
test just froze up on me, and I'm pretty sure it cost me like good 3, 4 minutes.
Okay.
But I was like, okay, it is what it is. I had a 710. I was like, fine, I can work with this number.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
And you know, I know we have like limited time here left, Fernando, but I do want to sort of
Please.
call out like the tagline, like my eye just went back to that. So I guess some people, and I'm kind of surprised no one asked this question yet. Like, how did I manage to get into a great business school with those numbers? And I'll just take a minute here to sort of elaborate on that. It would be helpful for people to put on admissions hat from time to time as they're analyzing their own candidacy. It is a numbers game at the end of the day, um, because all of these things affect a business school's rankings. Like, what does the average GPA for the class look like? What does the average GMAT for the class look like? But then what is also baked into the rankings is how many folks have offers at the time of graduation and what the average salary looks like. Right? Those numbers are also baked into those rankings. And the way I'd advise thinking about this is, at least in my case, okay, I had a low GPA. So Booth was definitely taking a hit on the GPA side for me. My GMAT was below average for Booth's median score or the average. So I was kind of, it was taking hits on both the GPA and GMAT in my case. So then why did they make an offer, and that too with a scholarship? And my sense on that is they saw that the other two levers, a person's ability to land a job and do that quickly enough, like that was perhaps what moved the scales in my favor. And the way to do that was being super open and communicative. Like when I was writing my optional essay, I was pretty open about it. Hey, in undergrad, I was at the Defense Academy. It's pretty rigorous. I was very heavily involved in social and curricular events and did not really focus. But that does not mean that I'm not interested in academics. And that is why I've done like MBA math is the one I took. Perhaps HBX score is something that others could consider. And even with my GMAT score, I call it out, and it's I've taken the GMAT a couple of times. Here is where I'm at. I'm super busy and like I'm deployed, so I can't really take it again. Should the admissions feel the need for me to improve my score, I'm open to that conversation. So it was, for me, it was, I always laid it out right on the table. And when it came times for my essays and interviews, like I've worked really hard on them. And I guess what they're trying to suss out when they're trying to ask you your long-term and short-term goals and why they're asking you specifically this business school, recruiting looks very similar. And I think, Fernando, you'd agree. It's a lot of networking. What does your story look like? Why do you want to go to that firm? Why do you want to work at this consulting company or XYZ bank? And what makes you a good fit? So the recruiting process itself is kind of similar to your application process to business school. And if you can indicate your readiness for recruiting, that just allays a lot of concerns around, would this person be successful at business school, not just academically, but also professionally in landing the job that they want? Do they seem like they have a plan? Or would they be able to quickly form a story and like run with it as recruiting hits? So once you're able to sort of answer those, allay those concerns a little bit, like then I think you're well set up.
No, and thank you so much for that caveat. It's great for people to hear that, I believe. And as a last question, I'm here because we just have 2 more minutes. So, what would be the advice that you would drop here for people who are now applying to business schools, studying for the GMAT, who are yet to come to their business school journey?
Aside from everything, I guess we've spoken about today, and at the cost of sounding like a broken record at this point, speak to current students. Um, it's an important decision for you, and you can use others' experience as a proxy for what your experience might look like, socially, academically, professionally, across the board. I guess if there was one piece of advice that I could give, it would be like speak to current students. We are all happy to speak to prospective applicants. We are super candid in how we share our experience. Um, so yeah, like doing that, I think just makes a lot of sense because it's an important and an expensive decision, but it also set you up really well as you're applying to business school.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Hit. And congrats for your journey so far and for the one that's yet to come, like getting from the military to Chicago booth, then recruiting IB and everything. It was like my pleasure to be here with you. If I
Likewise.
can ever be helpful in anything to you or to anyone who is watching, please, you all feel free to reach out anytime.
Yeah, thanks so much, Fernando and GMAT Club, for having me. It was lovely chatting with you today, and we'd probably connect offline later as well. But
Mhm.
just want to drop a note here for anyone who's like from a non-traditional background, especially veterans. Like, do not hesitate to reach out. We are always happy to talk to you. And like on my point earlier, like most of these schools will have like Booth has shaped the class, and other schools have different, like there's an ability for current students to write note to admissions too. So like if you can get these people to be the current students to be advocates for you, that's a strong signal to the admissions committee as well. So yeah, like circling back to that last message, reach out, speak to us.
Amazing advice. Thank you so much once again. I'm looking forward to connect and talk more. And thank you everyone who is watching us. See you all.
Bye bye now.
Bye.